Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to our first episode coverage of Masters of the Air on Story Archives. I'm your host, Mario Busto, alongside
the other host, Zachary Newton. Welcome back.
Zach. How you doing? It's been good week for you?
It's been a busy week, but I can't complain. I mean, good week. Baby's crying a lot. You know, my watch is telling me it's too loud. You gotta get away. So.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, she peaked over 90 decibels this morning.
Holy moly, that's like the Seattle Sounders stadium over there, Seattle Seahawks. Well, we had an eventful week. I'd say that this is the premiere of Apple's most anticipated show, obviously of the new year, but for a while now, and kind of perfect timing. I had read something that they started filming Masters of the Air during around the pandemic time, which at that point, you know, Austin Butler, although now he's like ascending into superstar, you know, Hollywood star status. Same with Barry Keoghan. That wasn't really the case at that point. They were up and coming for sure. You could kind of see it coming from a mile away, but this was largely before Elvis fame, largely before a lot of the things he's known for. He's going to be in Dune 2 coming up. And Barry Keoghan is, you know, he's straight off of Saltburn at this point. He's going to be playing Joker in the new Matt Reeves Batman films. He's in Banshees of Inisherin, was nominated for an Oscar, I believe, for that. I may be mistaken, but I don't know if I am. And nonetheless, just star-studded. And this is obviously, it's a genre a lot of people love. You know, I myself love history, love World War II history specifically. And just that generation, you know, the greatest generation that ever lived, right? You know, as we're told about. And I think these stories are probably some of the most important ones that can be told, as, you know, we live in an age now that takes a lot of things for granted because we're so far removed from a global conflict like World War II was.
Yeah, I mean, it has been quite some time since we've seen anything like that. But man, I always love watching things like this. I will say, going into the show, I am a sucker for period pieces and for military like movies and TV shows. I love the genre. It's insane that a lot of stuff like this like actually happens. It actually has happened. So like something that, I mean, hope to God I'd never actually have to see firsthand, but it is very engaging. It's very interesting to watch. So I'm in for it, even just because of that.
Before we get too deep into it, let's do a little bit of house cleaning, or housekeeping, as we should say. We just wrapped up a couple of series now. We wrapped up For All Mankind Season 4 on Apple TV. Apple TV has surprisingly turned into our bread and butter over the last year or so. That's most of the shows we're covering tend to be from Apple TV, although there's some other ones out there from other networks like True Detective that's out on HBO, or The Bear that's on Hulu, or plenty of others, House of the Dragon. I mean, I love Game of Thrones and that whole universe. And then some on Netflix, right? Well, speaking of one of them, Zach is editing or re-editing and posting an old series that we did when we first ran through every single season of Peaky Blinders. So we're pretty much going to be posting there very frequently on YouTube. Okay, they're already up on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you listen to podcasts. All those episodes are up. We're really posting them pretty much to catch up on a backlog of episodes that we had recorded prior to launching our YouTube channel. But now we're adding video in it. So you'll see my freshly moved into apartment in some of those videos with nothing behind me, nothing on the walls, pretty much a mess everywhere. You'll get a treat of seeing an apartment that's like from 4 years ago or 3 years ago. But it's very relevant because I think Peaky Blinders is a show that's going to be rediscovered, namely because the star actor probably has the performance of his lifetime. And I say that even against the film that he's nominated to win an Oscar for this year, in Oppenheimer. Cillian Murphy is in Peaky Blinder. He leads it as a character named Tommy Shelby. It's personally in my gauntlet of favorite shows because I love gangster shows and mafia shows and stuff like that. And it's actually kind of related to Masters of the Air because it comes fresh off of World War I. The boys are returning home to Birmingham, England, after World War I, after serving in World War I in some of the worst areas that they could have served as mutters in France during World War I, and they return home to a ravished England on the pretty much in an economic depression, trying to raise their family through the slums, through some shady business practice, if we can say, anything
Shady,
else. But it's
fun. I mean, I would
an
say they're
incredible show.
fun business practices.
Yeah, and you'll love it. Check it out. Our coverage is pretty much I think maybe one of the only podcasts you'll find that has done an entire series coverage through it. They're filming the follow-up film right now that's following up on season 6. And I think once Cillian Murphy wins the Oscars, which I think is going to happen, people are going to realize, hey, this guy had a show that ran for 6 seasons and they're doing a film about it. Let's go check it out. And that's what we're here for. Don't judge my production background too much at that point. But anyways, enjoy it. And check out our For All Mankind content, whatever else. And as always, rate the show. Let us know what you think. If you got any recommendations. And that's all I got to say. Let's get into it, Zach, shall we?
Let's do it.
Prior to this, while you were giving your baby a bubble bath, as you were telling
there was no bubbles involved.
You needed some extra time. While you were doing that, doing what you needed to do around the house, I was over here at my place. I was listening to a podcast with John Orloff. Pretty great podcast I discovered. I actually followed them now if anybody else out there wants to support them as well. They're called something along the lines of We Can Make Them Speak, or We Have Ways to Make Them Speak. And it seems that they focus a lot on World War II history. And they were interviewing the guy who's developed this show, who worked on Band of Brothers in the Pacific. His name's John Orloff. And in that, I kind of wrote some notes, just kind of set the scene of what Masters of the Air is going to be, what it's meant to be. And I had no idea because I haven't completed watching Band of Brothers or the Pacific, but it's on Netflix now, both of them. But Masters of the Air is supposed to be the trilogy to that. It's supposed to be like the third part of that series. I know they're not necessarily overlapping with characters, but this show is 10 years in the making. And the reason they didn't make it sooner was because they needed the technological capacity to have the scale that they wanted for this air warfare.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, I have kind of noticed maybe a little bit, right? Like this, to your point, the scale does feel bigger in the show compared to Band of Brothers. I mean, I watched Band of Brothers many years ago. I am currently rewatching it, but there is this really like up close and personal feeling that you get with Band of Brothers, which, I mean, it's one of the many reasons why I like it, but it's different in that regard. So that's a very interesting point.
I think it's going to be interesting for everyone involved to learn more about World War II. One of the things I loved most about that interview was he talked about how accurate they want to be with history. And they did a ton of research to the point where the animation team, and if anybody's listening from the production team who wants to call me out, you can email us at contact@soapbox.house. I'd love to have you on and pick your brain on that. They said that they were essentially basing the air mission. So if you see in episode 1, you have a few air missions, I believe 2 that you really see that are really violent, very bloody missions. You have Bucky Egan, Major Bucky Egan, and Gale Cleven both go on an air mission at this point in the show. And one of the things that Orloff was talking about was their research. The animation team was tracking each plane from mission to mission, and when a plane gets hit by a rocket, at the time that rocket hits, it is keyed to the time in the mission that rocket hit that plane. So in the middle of that's how accurate they're trying to be with this show. And I don't want to say too much because he didn't spoil a ton, but he did say enough that could be spoilery. And I know this is history, so if you really wanted to look it up, you could. And I don't tend to approach this the way I would fiction. But it is also nice to kind of see a story come together. And one of the things that they don't tell you in the series, and that the audience might be wondering, is how are these 2 young guys played by Austin Butler and Callum Turner, respectively Gale Cleven and Bucky Egan, how are they majors already? And Orloff answers that they're part of kind of the generation before the guys who signed up to serve in World War II. Because when World War II took place, Pearl Harbor took place, a bunch of people signed up to go serve. But these guys had already been in the Army Air Corps for 2 or 3 years prior to World War II, America's involvement in World War II beginning. So by the time World War II occurred, they hadn't had any combat experience, but they were majors in the Army at this point, which leads them to be the leaders of the 100th Bomber Group, which is what this show largely is about, which they call them the Bloody 100th because they're known for the number of like really bloody missions that they were a part of. Essentially, they were in some of the worst battles in World War II in the air.
Wow. Wow, that's interesting. And I do love when a show pays attention to detail. Though I want like that's incredible if they're literally that close to the reality that happened. It makes me wonder, like, you know, how much is too much, right? Like at some point there's got to be diminishing returns, but I don't know that I've ever been let down by a show that's actually paid that much attention to detail. It's like playing a video game. Like you want to be able to turn off all the HUDs and go through this story and enjoy and see like how amazing everybody was at creating that piece. So I'm excited.
And speaking about just like how important a piece like this is, it's not like it transcends TV at a certain point, right? Or in the legacy of what you look back on 50 years from now. Like I see this kind of as a time capsule piece if it's historically accurate. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Spielberg, you know, he's famous for a lot of things, famous for a lot of films, you know, but his like magnum opus, right? His, you know, the holy grail, like of all his films that he's done, really, I'm not going to say Jaws. I'm going to say it's Schindler's List, you know, in terms of what it means to him culturally. It's a film that he was pretty much, I forget which famous director approached him and said, you need to do this. But he had put it off for years to do it because he wasn't ready for it. And when he took on the directing job of doing Schindler's List, he did so, I don't believe I'm wrong on this, he did so largely because there was a lot of fake news occurring in terms of Holocaust deniers and that kind of shit spewing around that the Holocaust didn't exist. And Schindler's List, in a large part, is you think about it, if you want to tell somebody about the atrocities that were committed in World War II, you would push Schindler's List on, you know? He follows that up with, you know, Saving Private Ryan, and then executive produces Band of Brothers, The Pacific. This is all kind of like in his filmography of documenting some of the stories that occurred in World War II. And I'm sure he's got to be incredibly proud of it. He's not the only one executive producing it. Tom Hanks is also behind this as well. And I think Spielberg has a son who acts. I'm kind of fuzzy on that one, but I believe he's also in the show. Yes, I believe he's also in the show.
Okay. I had no idea. I didn't know he had a son that was acting. I'm kind of not surprised. I feel like once you're that big in the industry, like everybody in your family is going to want to kind of follow along in some form or another.
Yeah. Well, the actual show, the core of the show is based around Egan and Cleven's friendship. That's their best friends, and they remain that way. And that's kind of how the show kicks off, right? You get this opening scene where Bucky Egan's gonna take off to Europe before. And one of the things that I learned a little bit about World War II is that the second half of 1943 were the bloodiest air missions in the war. Largely because of they had to clear the way for all the American ships to come over, all the American troops to come over through the sea. They had to bomb all the, you know, German submarines and U-boats and all that stuff, right? That's why they were like in Norway in the beginning of this episode. And their first bombing mission here is really to take out German U-boats or something like that, if I believe. But they really kind of set the stage in a way where the stakes are high immediately. There's not a single mission. There's not a single action that takes place in a plane that doesn't feel nerve-wracking, even to the point of when Austin Butler is landing, his character's landing his plane like in Greenland, okay? And there's 50-mile-per-hour gusts that are occurring. It's to that point or that degree, I think, that they're kind of setting the stage that nothing is going to be a walk in the park here. The moment a plane takes off, you have no idea if that same plane's going to come back down. Yeah. Specifically, you see that in both of their starting missions, right?
Yep. Oh yeah, yeah. And I mean, I love that there's risk in this, right? Like I'm happy. I feel weird saying this every time I say this in a show. I'm happy that everybody's not just, you know, living and, you know, you get to make all these decisions scotch free. Like, you know, there's weight to it. Stuff happens. It's bad. It's dangerous. And I like that sort of risk. I like being on edge in a show, especially in this genre. Historically, it sucks. Like it's horrible that all this has happened. But for watching, I mean, it's good. It keeps me very engaged.
Um, I will say Austin Butler seems to be still. I don't know if this was filmed, how far before Elvis it was filmed. I know I said it came out like they started filming before Elvis, but it does feel very much like he's in Elvis mode with this role still. And there's a scene where he does go up for his first mission, and when he comes back down, he tells Bucky, his best friend, he says, "Why didn't you tell me it was like that up there? You know, you didn't say it would be like that." And it was because Bucky was pretty much told, don't tell him what it's going to be like. There's nothing that can prepare you for what's going to be up there. And the developer, one of the writers of the show, Orloff, I mentioned earlier, he mentioned that there was a quota of missions that these guys had to fly in at a certain point, right? Mm-hmm. And I don't know if the quota was instated at this point yet, but there came a point in World War II where these guys who were part of the Air Corps or the Air Force, they were seeing all their buddies go up on planes and none of them coming back down. And at a certain point, there was nothing that you could do to get them on a plane. Some of them, not everybody, but there was issues at some points that he was saying that people would want to go on a plane. So at a certain point, they had to instate a quota of you have to fly 25 missions. And if you fly 25 missions, you can go home. And then the thing is that nobody really survived past 11 missions. So that was an issue. But I think at this point in the war, there was no limit. Pretty much you fly it until you died. That was pretty much the way that these guys would approach serving in the military that day.
That's crazy. To the point that you were mentioning about Elvis. So Elvis started being filmed January 2020, went on hiatus because of COVID, resumed in 2021, and Masters of the Air was filmed in 2021 as well. So
okay, so this is like fresh off Elvis.
Well, it could have been at the same time to some degree.
Well, he's got his collar up the whole time. I do need to see that coolness go away at certain points when you see all your buddies dying around you.
Yeah, you just can't have a toothpick in your mouth. Just be like, all right.
You can't be playing it like. I mean, who am I to tell Austin Butler how to play it? But you can't be playing it like, all right, boys, line them up and knock them down, rack them up, and at a certain point, you're losing. Guys taking a bullet shell to the face or a rocket shell to the face. Like at a certain point, there should be some sort of that you're not calm, cool, collected on everything, right? Yeah. But hey, honestly, I think pieces like this at times are to make these characters legends, almost mythical type, figures, right?
Yeah.
So if I'm him, I'd play it cool too. I'm not gonna lie. I'd have, when I'm riding inside the Jeep, I'd have my right foot outside of the thing, right over the tire as well. I'd have my collar popped, all that sort of thing. But
whenever you're not being shot at, right? Like that's okay. That's acceptable.
Yeah. Thoughts on the opening battle sequence for Bucky when he goes up there as the observational pilot? Because these guys seemed like that they were destined to lead. That's kind of like what the impression is at the moment you get there. And then you even got the guy who's in charge of the squadron is pretty much vomiting blood the entire episode.
Yeah. I mean, like I liked it. I was a little nervous that we were going to have a show that started out where it was a bunch of like time jumps. We had another storyline being told in two different parts.
Time jumps.
Man, I'll tell you, I was nervous for a moment when we cut straight to the battle, but I think that it really like calmed down. We didn't get a lot of this back and forth stuff going on, which I appreciated that kind of went away. So
it was the first show in a while that we don't have to deal with time jumps because
oh my gosh,
we just finished Monarch Legacy of Monsters and that show was a living time jump.
3 timelines in there,
yeah. Which I can deal with it, but I don't want the whole show to be like an entire episode just dedicated to.
Yeah, you gotta like draw out plot points and all right, where was this? This took place then. Okay, got it.
Yeah. By the way, if I can add one more thing before you say your point, the blonde in the beginning, the romantic interest of Gale Cleven, Isabel May. She's an actress. She's in 1883, the Yellowstone prequel. She's amazing. Like she's amazing in that show, and it took me about 10 minutes because she doesn't look like her version of her character in 1883.
Yeah.
She is incredible in 1883. So I don't know if she's just like a one-off. That was the only scene we're going to see her in. But she's really good. So I do wonder if she comes back into play because she's kind of a rising name too in Hollywood.
Well, I have a feeling that we're gonna have to go back to see like that version of the characters at some point. Like I don't think we're all just gonna stay over in England and right in the middle of the
It's only
war.
9
I
episodes,
imagine that.
Zach.
What?
It's only 9 episodes. I could totally see it just being in
Well,
Europe.
it could be. I mean, I would imagine you're gonna have some sort of flashback at some point to continue some
Yeah.
character building, and I'm okay with some flashbacks, just not like massive, time jumps
Yeah.
and things like that going on. But no, anyways, I like the show. I agree with you. I do think that these guys are natural born leaders. It does, kind of come off right away. One of the things I was talking about attention to detail, by the way. This happened a little bit later on in the episode. Embarrassing thing, for me at least, I think I love shows like this. I love movies like this, and I never really thought about like what flak cannons, flak fire was, but there was like this split second in this episode where I heard a metal piece of shrapnel just cut right through the plane, and I think you could see it like stick somewhere in the inside of the plane. I was like, oh man. That's what flak cannons are. That's how they take out planes. Because I would always wonder, I'd be like, how the heck are they blowing planes out of the air? These things are exploding, not even close to them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So
you're talking about that metal shard that came through.
That metal shard that came straight. Exactly. Yeah. And it was at that very moment that I'm like, oh, that's how flak cannons work. Because I had never looked it up. But it's that attention to detail that I really, really love. So I thank them for that because I learned something from the show already.
One of the things I kind of found... it was like interesting to me because I hadn't really imagined this scenario was when they're on their bombing run. Okay. And there's so many clouds that they have no visibility of what they're bombing. And this is what distinguishes like the good guys from the bad guys. The good guys cancel their bombing missions when they can't see what they're bombing, which was just like an interesting bit. And also you can tell immediately, like their planes are not the type of planes they're not nimble, so to speak.
No,
at least, so they're at a disadvantage with these fighter jets that are just out there, just zooming around. At this point, it's I'm assuming it's the Luftwaffe. How do you pronounce that, Zach? The Luftwaffe?
Lufthansa.
The German word.
That's the airplane.
Lufthansa? Yeah, that's the German side of. Those are the ones they're fighting in this episode. Put it that way. Yeah. I also noticed the navigators, who the narrator of the story is the navigator. He's played by Anthony Boyle. His character, his last name is Crosby. Just the way that they'd have to navigate back in the day, to the point where they're trying to, they're heading in a certain direction. They end up in France instead of England. And which where you see that the air defense, like up in the sky, all those plumes of smoke that you see right there in that screenshot you have. I thought that was just kind of literally a blast from the past of how these guys would have to navigate through these battles. Like all you'd get was a PowerPoint presentation of what you're going to do. And then you go out there and you got a navigator who's just telling you everything. Go for it.
Off of a piece of paper, mind you.
Crazy.
I can't even picture somebody driving around the city over here using a paper map, let alone charting their course in an airplane while being shot at by other planes and flak cannons. So amazing. And it's not Lufthansa. I actually don't know how to pronounce this. I know it's the Luftwaffe or something like that.
Yeah, something
close to that. If I'm pronouncing that wrong, please tell me how to pronounce that because I should learn that at some point.
I think we're heading towards Austin Butler and I keep on saying Austin, but I should just call them by their character names. Gale and Bucky. They're going to be in charge probably by the next episode of the 100th, right? Because you got the CO who passes out after their mission, pretty much just throws up blood. I don't know what condition he has, but just throws up a bunch of blood throughout the episode, and he looks sickly. He's like very skinny and sickly looking. So I would imagine, you do get that scene with Bucky being reprimanded to pretty much fall in line, and Bucky saying he doesn't want to be sitting behind a desk his entire time there. So I think he's going to get what he asked for, and is going to get thrust into the position of being on more of these missions in the cockpit, so to speak.
I would imagine so. Otherwise, there's not really much of a need to show this guy coughing up blood. It's just kind of irrelevant at that point.
Yeah.
So,
would you?
Oh, well, around the coffin of blood or just anything else? I was gonna
Yeah,
ask.
anything else?
I was gonna ask you, would you be landing your plane in those gusts of wind? They were coming in earlier in the show, like sideways. I was surprised that they all landed. I thought one of them was gonna
Well,
land
they
and the other was
didn't.
gonna like take off.
They didn't. One
One of
of
them
them
had to pull
landed.
up.
The other one had to pull up and do another lap around to try it again.
Yeah.
And then, I mean, we saw the issues with landing with those manual crank landing gears
Oh
in
yeah.
those days, man. So you had the crash landing in the grassy field. I mean, nothing is going to be easy. Nothing's going to be just like a walk in the park mission or drill. Everything is high stakes in this show, and I think although episode 1 feels slightly uneventful, I think it does set the scene successfully for what's going to be the foundation of the series, which is the friendship of Bucky and Gale. What are we going to be following? We're going to be following the 100th and the characters that we meet there, like Crosby, like Barry Keoghan's character, who I did not catch his name. If you could look that up for me when you get a chance.
Yeah.
And
Barry
many others.
Keoghan,
I think even
Lieutenant Curtis
Jude
Biddick.
Law's, what's his name?
Lieutenant Curtis Biddick.
Biddick. Okay.
Yeah.
And you even have Jude Law's son. What's Jude Law's son's name? I think it's like Rafe or something like that.
Rafferty. He's Sergeant Ken Lemons.
Ken Lemons.
Ken
Lemons.
Lemons.
That has a nice ring to it. Ken Lemons.
Yeah, it's very
Sounds
citrusy.
like a fake announcer name. What are you looking forward to most in this series as we move forward? I haven't watched episode 2 yet. We were going to do an episode 1 and 2 sort of recap, but it's kind of more just discussing the show really, and what we enjoyed most about it, and what we're looking forward to, and in documenting sort of our perspective on what happened back then, and just the bravery that it took to freaking fly these planes knowing that there is a high chance that you weren't coming back.
Yeah. I don't quite know what I'm looking forward to just yet, other than like a very like immersive experience and just learning more about the war, about what actually happened. Like that's one of the reasons why I love these shows. Like I don't necessarily go out and do a ton of research on these just on my own, but I am fascinated by the subject. So I'm not quite sure just yet what I'm looking forward to most. Like I might by the end of like the next episode, but yeah, I need to see it develop a little bit more to kind of see like, you know, I guess what things are really at play other than just this grand scale of a war. How about you though? Did anything stand out to you?
Well, in terms of things I'm looking forward to, I kind of can say the same things. I want to learn more. I always love learning more about these World War II stories specifically. Just like the different battlefronts that there were, you know, like this is one of them. There's many others, right?
Yeah.
And I did not know to the details that the second half of 1943, really leading up to D-Day in 1944, that was some of the most bloody missions that were had, at least by the American side and whatnot, to prepare to like make way for our involvement in the war. Yeah. But I'm looking forward to that. I'm just looking forward to learning more about it and just enjoying the series. I mean, that's kind of the good thing about it, is we get to enjoy it from our couches while these guys lived it. Just crazy, man, crazy. But I do expect some incredible air battles, and I'm also looking forward to that. I think it's going to be action packed pretty much through and through, and I just can't believe that we're living in a time that this is a TV show and not a movie. So it's pretty insane, and it just speaks a lot that they had been working on this for 10 years, and that now is the time that they can effectively do it to the vision that they had, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, this guy went so far as to say that he figured, like at one point, I don't know if he was being sarcastic, but there was times in developing the show that he was like, this should be 4 seasons, not 9 episodes. So let's see how that plays out.
I was going to say, this is only going to be a 1 season thing, isn't it?
This is a 1 season thing. This is a 9-part miniseries.
I think I'm happy with that, because that's very much, that's how Band of Brothers was. And dude, that show is amazing. Like to this day, like I still think back about that show and I'm just like, man, that was such a great thing. And it's crazy because it really is only like 9 or 10 episodes, but I feel like there's so much there. There's so much that goes on. So I don't know. I think they'll pull it off. I mean, you've got great people behind the show. Just, I mean, it's the same people behind Band of Brothers and Pacific, like you mentioned earlier in this episode.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
I think they'll pull it off, and I'm looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to see what it is. Maybe this will turn into like a scenario where, you know, Apple keeps paying for them to produce shows like this, and you end up, you know, covering a bunch of different stories.
Well,
But
Apple's
maybe
getting
they
to a
treat it like
point.
different.
Apple's
Yeah.
getting to a point where their original storytelling is getting crazy. I mean, they have a show coming out called Constellation that has Noomi Rapace and Jonathan Banks, who's from Breaking Bad. He plays Mike Ehrmantraut. That looks incredible. It's a mystery series, comes out in February. So there's a lot of stuff coming out for Apple that's already come out. They should be proud of themselves. And I haven't even mentioned this episode was directed by Kerry Joji Fukunaga, and that guy is a beast. Like, he's just an animal. Look up his filmography, and you'll see that he's done just about everything. So, yeah, Zach, let's get into some categories and let's close out episode 1. We're looking forward to the rest of the season.
All right. Well, let's start out with favorite character of the episode.
I think it's got to be your two main characters, right? Although I will say, I think I like Bucky a little more than Gale so far, just because you get a little more background. That bar scene was really fun, where he's, you know, he has an apple, you know.
Yeah.
He like makes friends with like everybody at the bar and kind of has like a wager to win 2 bicycles. So I thought he kind of like wins the episode for me personally.
I was gonna go with Buck, not Bucky.
Hold on, I'm calling Gale Austin Butler's character because it's gonna be too confusing.
I know it's gonna be so confusing.
Buck
and Bucky. I was wondering if we were gonna slip up and call them that, but no, Gale Cleven I liked a lot in this one. He's so calm. Like, he's the battle buddy that you want. He's not gonna freak you out.
He's the definition of cool. Yeah,
literally. Yeah. All right.
He's got like that. If you've seen that Brad Pitt movie where he's a pilot, and he's like falling from like just a ridiculous height. I mean, it's just like infinite height that he's just dropping from, and his heart rate is like 40, or like it's like not elevating at all. You know, that's kind of thing. I feel like Gale's heart rate never went above like 45 in this episode. He was just like, rack him up and knock him down the whole time. Left side flaps up. Everyone's getting rocket shells into the freaking dome.
Well, he's my favorite in this one. How about favorite scene of the episode?
I think favorite scene has to be their first 2 missions. Maybe the lead up to the mission. I really did enjoy the scene of kind of the nerves. I was talking to my dad about this. I was like, you imagine the nerves, the morning of your mission. I wouldn't be able to eat a full breakfast. I'd throw up my entire breakfast if I had to eat like a bunch of stuff, but they would call it the Last Supper. You know, ain't no way you're having like eggs in a full spread right before you're going up into the sky. There's just no way.
Full English breakfast.
Yeah, and even having the priest there, you know?
Yeah.
So
it reminded me of MASH. Have you ever watched that show?
Not like a full episode, but I've seen it like tons of times.
Oh, there's just the Reverend in there, so seeing him pop. Like, I don't really see any shows where there's like a Reverend guy that comes in here.
Yeah.
So it was interesting to see him pop his head up.
Yeah, the Reverend sort of looked like Lord Downey. What's it? Downton Abbey, the show. He looked like the father from that show. Anyways, anything else?
I kind of liked the scene. I actually liked the scene with Bucky, Egan, where he had the apple in his hand. That was the one scene that I liked a lot with him. I love seeing it was that bit, but it was also seeing Cleven come in and give the guy a unicorn.
Yeah.
So
you can tell he's a ball buster in terms of like he's the troublemaker in the group, right?
Yeah. It was funny. It showed a lot about the characters, and I mean, they look like they're going to be a fun couple to hang around. Yeah, fun duo.
Yeah.
I don't have any lines that stuck out to me in this one. This doesn't feel like a line show so much.
I gotta say, because I've repeated the line like 70 times, is Austin Butler when he goes, "Rack him up and knock him down."
Oh, well, there's that one. I hope they're not all. I don't want to
Cliche
say
ones,
corny. Yeah, cliche. Like I hope we get some non-cliche lines that stand out.
Pretty
Uh,
badass though. Like you're talking to your boys
yeah.
right before the fight. All right, boys, let's rag them up, knock them down. Like that's the shit you say. Like right before everyone goes and marches off to their death. Like at the very least, everyone's gonna be like, he's cool. Even when he gets on there, the guy's like, I sense the spirit of God in you, sir. He's like, all right, let's go.
Oh man, amazing.
All right,
I've
let's do it, right?
gotta ask.
Oh, never mind.
Have you ever been in a B-17?
No, have you?
Yeah, I walked through one once. It's very
Like
interesting.
at the museum of like some museum.
I don't remember where it was for the life of me. I was on vacation somewhere. And we were doing like a walkthrough, and we got to see like a lot of World War II equipment, and we got to walk through one of the. It was a few planes, but one of them was a B-17. You get to climb through the whole thing, get in the cockpit, get in the actual like gunner pod, which by the way is terrifying to be in. Imagine sitting in that like glass bowl
And they lock
with
you
nothing. Yeah, pretty much with nothing.
Yeah, they shut like a door. They have to let you out.
Yeah, they gotta let you out. There's nothing underneath you. You just see straight down to your death, basically, firing a 50 cal. I actually have a 50 caliber round that I got. I remember I got that when we were doing the walkthrough of that plane. Mm-hmm. So I always will remember that. It was great. But that'll do it. That's all I got. That's the only interesting story I have here.
Thank you all for joining us. I hope you enjoyed the series. I hope you enjoyed the pilot. And I hope you enjoy our podcast coverage of it as you join us as we watch the show too. I'm looking forward to watching episode 2. And you can expect a second episode of our coverage on it probably early next week. I don't want to put any, could be sooner. Could be early next week, probably is the latest that you'll get it. So thank you all for tuning in. And Zach, to your epic outro, sir.
Well, thank you for listening to this episode of Masters of the Air by Story Archives. You can find this podcast anywhere you find podcasts, Apple and Spotify podcasts. You can visit us on YouTube at Soapbox Podcast Network. Visit our website at soapbox.house. Email us at contact@soapbox.house. And we do have a link in the description below to sign up for our quarterly newsletter.
All right. Thanks for tuning in, y'all. Until next time, peace.